Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. So today we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the problems that are occurring in the Japanese banking system and how that's going to affect everything in the world. We're talking about the Israel and Hezbollah conflict. We're going to talk about Russia and Ukraine. We're also going to talk about the lessons that are going to be that our adversaries are going to be using from Ukraine, from this conflict, how they're going to be putting those, learning those lessons and then putting them into, unfortunately, us in the UK and potentially if you live in the US, anywhere else that's an adversary of Russia, how they're going to be using those things against you guys. So guys, let's just begin because I know your time is important. So guys, also don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share my stuff if you feel it's if you feel it's relevant. If you don't, guys, challenge me. If you think things that I'm saying are not right or they don't make sense or I'm totally off the mark, please let me know in the comments and I'll address them as much as I can. So the Japanese banking system, why this is important, guys, okay? Just before we talk about the Japan, because I know you're thinking, oh, Japan, it's miles away. But Japan is the biggest holder of US treasuries, So if we start to see problems in Japan, that kind of means there's going to be problems in the United States. So Japan is cashing in on, they've got $63 billion of US treasuries and European treasuries. Now they've said that, well, a Japanese bank called Norinchukana or something, guys. I may be slaying that word, I do apologise. But basically this bank's saying that they've had a load of unrealised debt and they need to cash in their US dollars. Now, what's really concerning about this is, like I said, Japan's the biggest holder of US treasuries. If Japan on a wider spectrum, all Japanese banks start to liquidate their US treasuries, what we could see is, is a dollar run. In the sense that, I've spoke about bank runs before. So if you're in the UK, remember when Northern Rock went bust and people were trying to get their money out, people were trying to cash their shares in, and the people who didn't cash their shares in at the beginning, they lost everything. So these bank runs happen quick. So what would happen is if Japan starts to take money out of the US Treasury system and cash in all their dollars, then what other countries could do, other banks could do, they could think, oh, right, well, if we don't get our dollars out quick, then we're going to lose our dollars. So it would happen really, really quickly. Now, you would see this before a war. Remember what's happened with Saudi Arabia recently? They've said that they're not going to be, they're not going to be exclusively selling their oil in dollars. I feel this is a way to go away. This is it's certainly a step towards global de-dollarization. And now we're seeing this, this in Japan. The Japanese banks now starting to take their money away from the dollar. Again, what we're seeing is on a global spectrum now, we're seeing loss in trust of the US dollar. This is because of, there's a few things of this, guys, all right? First of all, the US has got too big and it started to implode. I don't think it's quite there yet, but I think remember, guys, okay, empires don't fall from outside, outside adversaries. They crumble from within, and that's what you're seeing in real time with the US. So if countries and other nations start to lose faith in the US dollar and de-dollarize, they're going to be pushed towards the BRICS nations, which is, I've spoke about that quite a lot, but I think we could be looking at the very, the seedlings of, guys, I can't believe I'm saying this, of a dollar run. And if that happens, and if you live in the United States, guys, especially if you live in the United States and we start to see banks all over the world start cashing in their US treasuries, things are going to get really bad for you guys in the United States. And I don't want to be doom and gloom, especially, and I don't want to comment on another country's policies, but the reality is, if the dollar loses its purchasing power, then things in the United States will absolutely rocket. And that will have, especially for us in the UK, that will have huge implications with trade, with being able to buy things, being able to sell things, all the all the systems that we are built to rely on, they'll kind of collapse because people won't be able to trade with each other anymore, because the price of things what you've bought and what you're trying to sell it for just won't add up anymore. And this could happen really quickly, as all bank runs do, because the first people to take their money out get their money, the last people, they don't get their money. So that's the reality of the situation, guys, okay? Yeah, so the Israel and Hezbollah conflict, you know, there's a lot of people all over the news, they're all saying this conflict's about to start. They're saying, you know, Israel's going to do a ground invasion into southern Lebanon. You have the Lebanese, well, you have Hezbollah threatening Cyprus. I spoke yesterday on why Hezbollah are threatening Cyprus. They're not threatening people in Ayia Napa. They're threatening the air capacity in Cyprus, the NATO air capacity, mainly through RAF Akateria. So this conflict then, it's looking imminent. And the elephant in the room, guys, here is Iran. You know, Iran is controlling that whole region. That whole region, you know, Iran's pumping money, they're pumping influence, they're pumping support and weapons. Now, what I want to talk about here is, and certainly when I was in the military, we never did any of this. I don't know if people in the military train on this now. You know, it certainly wasn't a thing when I was in the military. I still have a lot of friends in the military and they've not mentioned it, so I don't think it is. But these tunnel networks. So when we visualize these tunnel networks, we think of, like, you know, a few little tunnels underground. But the reality is there's huge networks of tunnels and storage facilities and firing points. And they've, you know, so what I think Hezbollah have realized is it's not really a war, from the conflict in Gaza, you know, the Hamas fighters have had a really good success by not fighting on the ground, but going underground. And they've had years to prepare these tunnels. You know, you can bury diggers, you can bury mini diggers, tractors, bulldozers, you can bury all that stuff. Once they're buried underground, nobody can see what these things are digging. You know, you can have a really extensive network underground, which is what's happened in Lebanon with Hezbollah. So why is this important? Well, it kind of nullifies all modern weapons. There really isn't anything that can, you know, penetrate that deep. So what is the range of, you know, for example, you know, you think, okay, well, we're going to send our special forces in. Okay, that's fine. What's the range of those special forces rifles? Well, you know, when they've got all these fancy scopes and stuff. The reality is, with these tunnel systems, with the sharp bends, it kind of neutralizes all that sort of stuff. And yes, you know, it comes down to close quarter battle. But I think this is going to be a new, a new area of warfare that we're just not prepared for in the West. You know, with these tunnels, you can put traps, you can put gas, you can put all sorts of fantastic stuff in there. And the reality is, if you want to clear those tunnels, you've either got to destroy them and confirm they're destroyed, or you've got to send troops in there. If you're sending troops in there, expect a huge attrition rate, because, you know, a lot of those troops are not coming back. So, you know, I really don't know how the Israelis are going to deal with these tunnel systems, because, you know, you can't take them from the air. You can't really confirm that they've been destroyed unless you get boots in there. So I don't know how they would deal with that. I really don't, guys, okay? I think it's going to be a new phase of warfare as other countries understand and they see these things and think, right, okay, NATO have got all this air power, fine, let's just go, I don't know, 10 feet underground. I was watching an old video last night on about the Anderson shelters, and I saw an Anderson shelter. It had I think it was under 4 feet of earth, and somebody placed a German bomb at the time. I can't remember where it was, and they detonated this bomb. They laid it on top. I think they actually placed it so it was perfect in the right on top of the Anderson shelter, and they detonated it. I think 4 foot of earth, and it was just, it was unscathed. I know modern weapons, there are a lot more sophisticated now. They've got ground penetrating stuff, but still, when you're talking about going down into bedrock, guys, you can just forget about it. It's not going to happen. So I really don't know how the Israelis are going to deal with this. What you can see is, a long protracted conflict there with a lot of loss on either side. What we need to remember with this conflict is what Vladimir Putin said a couple of, I don't know. All my days are mashed together at the moment, guys. So it might be a couple of weeks, maybe a week ago or something. But he said basically he's going to arm the West's adversaries, and the main player in that region that I see is Syria. Remember, you know, Russia propped up Assad. You know, there was a lot of Russian air power went into Syria. So the Russians have the capacity, they have the knowledge and the understanding, they know the runways, they know the people, they know the culture, they know the infrastructure of that region. It'd be very easy for Russia to send in some of their, you know, some of their new glide munitions, which brings me on, you know, and so the Russian glide munitions, guys, they've just released a new, the Russians have just put out a new glide munition, which is, I'll put the links into the description. It's a 6,600 pound bomb, which is, you know, if you're using the correct metrics, it's about 3 tons. Now, you can imagine how devastating 3 tons of bomb can be. And if, you know, the Russians give these things to the, you know, to the Syrians, to whoever really, they can cause a lot of damage to RAF Akateria, to Cyprus, to Israel, and to all these things. Why is that important? Well, let's look at the defense systems that we have in NATO. Again, I've done a lot of videos talking about this this Dragonfire laser and how it's just not fit for purpose. So under no circumstances is this Dragonfire laser going to be able to deal with one of these glide munitions. You know, I mean, so for those of you who don't know, a glide munition is basically a drone without a motor that's sent up in a, you know, in an aircraft. They drop the, you know, they drop it, and then somebody guides that in either by first person view, or I don't know how they glide it, but it's very fast. It's got one use, there's no engine on it, and it literally glides with some wings. It's kind of like a JDAM. You know, it will glide into something and it will just destroy it. There really isn't any answer that we have in the West for this. You know, there's all sorts of, you know, calls and funding applications for people, for someone in industry just to come up and say, guys, look, we've got the solution to deal with this glide munitions. But there isn't any really. You need to send a missile up to intercept it. And then that brings down to the, you know, the cost ratio of being able to defeat these, because the radar won't, you know, when you set your radar on these, say for example, a Patriot missile system, when you set the radar for that, it's kind of, how do you set that radar? Do you set that radar to take out anything that's in the sky? Do you set that radar to take out anything of above a certain size, of a certain speed? So you can imagine now a situation where you've got your big glide munition, but before you send your glide munition, you send 20 cheap drones with a kilo of explosives or something. So you see how the drone warfare has just, you know, it's just changed everything, because you can now conduct these operations far, far back, and the West, we really don't have any answer for this, no matter how much money we throw at this. I think the answer is build our own drones and be offensive rather than defensive. But anyway, guys, so let me talk about the you know, this new bomb that the Russians are starting to use. Like I said, guys, it's about a 3-ton warhead. Now they've been using this very successfully on the power grid in Ukraine. Now remember what I've said. You don't need to, you know, go into a city, Black Hawk Down style, or what's the one I'm looking for, or what's it? I want to say Mosul, but it wasn't Mosul. In Iraq, what's the place in Iraq? I can't remember. You know, but you don't need to go into a city and take it like US Marine style anymore. What you do is you just turn off people's utilities. It's that simple. You say, right, guys, I'm going to turn off your gas, your electric, your water. If you be good and you behave, do what I say, we'll turn it back on. And guess what? 9 times out of 10, you know, those people in that city will behave, because they don't want all this stuff turning off. And remember, if you've encircled the city, like the Russians are trying to do in Kharkiv, then you've kind of controlled it anyway. You don't need to invest any manpower into that city, because it's a nightmare when you invest, you know, manpower into built up areas. So both sides in the Ukraine conflict are now targeting each other's energy, you know, energy energy supply system, their energy infrastructure, gas, oil refineries, you know, so both sides are targeting these things, guys, all right? And really, you know, the West needs to wake up on the, how do you say, on the effectiveness of these small, cheap drones, because, you know, here in the West, we really can't imagine what's coming and how things could go from where we are now to really, really bad. So how is this going to affect you guys in the UK, and I think in the United States as well? I think you're more vulnerable in the United States. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe as well is a lot more vulnerable. But I'm going to focus this segment on the UK, and then, you know, you can just think of how that affects you wherever you are in the world, you know, and your system. So the UK energy grid, then, I did a top 10 on the, you know, UK soft targets that would be attacked by our adversaries. So the UK energy grid, then, so you've got the domestic, you've got small commercial, large industrial, you've got transformers, you've got substations, you've got power lines, you've got the generation, you've got the actual where it's generated, which could be gas, coal, nuclear, wind, solar, all those sort of things, guys, all right? And all these systems, when they're built, they're not built hardened for war. They're not built with any sort of defense mechanisms, or when these guys were putting these things together, you know, they were done by private companies, so they will have gone at the minimum specification from the customer, and usually the minimum specification means the cheapest, and however that will have been done. A lot of these systems are very, very old now. And a lot of the components, you know, for example, from the transformers in the substations, they will be built by companies that have now gone out of business. And if that company's not gone out of business, a lot of the parts that they'll try to get, like, you know, it might be something as ridiculous as a small bolt with a certain thread that they just can't get anymore, and they're licensed to build that, to buy that off a certain manufacturer. And it's these little niggly things that slow these big processes down, and people say, oh yeah but oh no, we guaranteed it, and then the company said, no, look, it is guaranteed, but this is a subcontract. It's those who are letting us down, and that'll go down the chain, and nobody will be to blame, and everybody will be without electricity. But anyway, you know, these things are not built to withstand a wartime situation. You know, there's more people in the UK now than any other time in history. And the problem now, guys, you know, we can argue where these new people have come from, but, you know, I'm not going to go down there. But what we need to understand is there is 100% a lot more people now, and there's a lot more people every day, and it's growing exponentially, you know, here. And each person needs more wattage. The energy system's not being upgraded to deal with all these new people. So there's already a lot of strain on our energy system because it's just not being upgraded, because it can't be upgraded at the same time as our population growth. It's just not happening. So as we can look forwards, you know, we've seen this all over, you know, I think there was a German report from the German Intelligence Committee, and they said that Russia are now paying people to spy for them. Well, another word for spy, well, you know, you can also put in the same bracket that the Russians will be paying people to do sabotage, you know, attacks. Guys, it's just a part of this process that we're going through, all right? So if we take that for that it will happen, all right, then the energy system, remember the parts, each one of those parts that I said about the energy system, you see how ridiculously vulnerable it is. Now, there will be critical points in our energy system. I don't know where they are. It may be power lines that, you know, critical power lines. It may be critical substations that do a lot of things. And once you start, if you can, you know, make one of them stop working, then that puts added pressure on the other systems. Now, we're already under strain because we've got more people plugging phones in, plugging heaters in, plugging all sorts of stuff in. So we're already under a huge strain with our energy system. We import a lot of energy from France. Now, if France comes under, you know, if there's a concerted, you know, European big push on our energy system by criminal gangs, then we're all going to be without electricity. And there's so much stuff that we don't, everything's running electricity, guys, all right? So that's, this is a huge problem that I feel we're going to face in the near future. Remember what we said about the drones, these cheap drones. You can buy cheap drones in the UK quite easily. You can then, just as an example, imagine if there was a criminal gang in the UK that had access to some sort of device that could, and I don't want to use keywords, guys, but we know there's stuff coming in from Europe or on these boats. So you can imagine if there was an electricity line, you could go to one end of that electricity line and the other one, and you could take out a piece of cable on a critical piece of infrastructure. That's going to have huge effects all over, guys, all right? So the energy grid, what we're seeing in Ukraine, people will be looking at this and seeing how effective taking out this energy grid is. And I feel that, our adversaries will be looking at this and saying, hey, do you know what? We don't have to deploy any of our manpower. We don't have to deploy any of our infrastructure. All we need to do is send some money to some guys in the UK or in the US or in anywhere else, and say, right, on this date, on this time, I want you to do this. And, and these things will happen because guess what? Criminal gangs are criminal and they want money. And that's the reality, guys. And that's the reality of these soft targets, of these grey warfare that's going to happen in the UK. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to Mag to Grid.